Babyface Nelson was public enemy number one of the Depression-era America. So what did he do when Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow got ambushed in Louisiana on May the 23rd, 1934? So let's start first with what that ambush meant to Nelson specifically, because no outlaw in America had less wiggle room than Babyface Nelson did that morning. A month earlier, outside the Little Bohemia Lodge up in Wisconsin, he had shot 3 lawmen at close range, killing one of them, a federal agent named W. Carter Bowham. Killing a federal agent took surrender off the table, most likely. His last known position going into that week was northern Illinois. He and his wife went to ground somewhere in the Chicago area, and when the FBI later tried to piece together his movements, Melvin Purvis's office in Chicago included, their own report admits his whereabouts through late May and early June are obscure. Now, that sentence took some doing. Here was a 25-year-old man whose face was printed on every newspaper in the country, hiding in the suburbs of the 3rd biggest city in America. While the most motivated police force in the nation, they couldn't find him. That's not luck. My cousin can't stay hidden from his wife for one afternoon of fishing, and he's not famous. Nelson stayed invisible by shutting down every visible piece of his life during that exact stretch when the government was demonstrating what happens to visible outlaws. He was invisible, right? Now, at that time. Now, here's the part that Nelson's reaction that didn't belong to him alone. It belonged to his marriage, because that Louisiana ambush delivered a very specific message to married couples in his line of work. Bonnie Parker died in the passenger seat next to Clyde Barrow, and the posse put 26 rounds into her. Before that morning, a woman riding with a wanted man could at least hope lawmen would hold the fire on her. That hope died on that Louisiana road. Every woman attached to a wanted man in America now knew the government would shoot her right along with him. Helen Gillis was 4 weeks out of federal custody when that news broke. She'd been captured at the Little Bohemian when the men ran, then held. Then she was tried, and released on parole. By May, she was free and legally in the clear, standing all the way outside the mess. She could go away. The smartest move available to that woman was to stay gone and let the government forget her. You know what she did instead? She went back to Babyface Nelson. Roughly a month after Little Bohemia, which lands almost exactly on the ambush, Helen rejoined her husband in hiding, and the two of them lived quiet near Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, for several days before moving on. The newspapers were still running photographs of that shot up 4 and the 2 bodies in it down in Louisiana, and the 21-year-old mother of 2 picked that exact week to climb back in the car with her most hunted husband in the country. I've heard people say love makes you do crazy things, but usually that means somebody drove 4 hours to return a casserole dish. This ain't it. Nothing about the Nelson household changed after May the 23rd in that regard. The last married outlaw couple in America watched what happened to the other one. They stayed a couple. Nelson's professional answer came 5 weeks later, and it was every bit as clear. On June the 23rd, 1934, the Attorney General put a federal warrant on Nelson's head. 7 days later, on June the 30th, 38 days after the Gibbsland ambush down there, Nelson walked into the Merchants National Bank in South Bend, Indiana, with John Dillinger and Homer Van Meter, and he robbed it in broad daylight. A police officer was shot and killed during that job, and Nelson reportedly took a bullet to the chest himself. He lived because he was wearing a bulletproof vest. Then the gang ran to Chicago, and when the 2 police officers later approached their meeting spot on Wolf Road outside the city, Nelson opened fire on them too. So the government demonstrates its ambush policy in Louisiana. then puts a price on Nelson's head, and Nelson answers back by robbing a bank alongside two other most wanted men in America and shooting at every police officer who gets nearby. The ambush didn't make Nelson careful about the work. It made him careful about about everything except the work. The split is the whole shape of the man. In hiding, he was so disciplined, the federal files admit they lost him for a week at a time. But on the job, he acted like May the 23rd never happened. Other men on the wanted list read that ambush and quietly stopped robbing banks without ever announcing they retired. Nelson, he didn't cut back anything. And the reasoning is cold, but it is sound. A man facing prison can be scared straight by the threat of a worse sentence. Nelson already faced the worst outcome there was, and you can't threaten a man with something he's already been promised. This whole summer proves he understood that math down to the last penny. The months after that showed the same pattern stretched clean across the country. He thought he was going to get whacked before it was all over, or he's going to be able to do something else. Nelson, Helen, and his partner, John Paul Chase, left Chicago for California and spent the rest of the summer driving back and forth between Chicago and the West Coast. Smart man, because he was trying to figure it out. They were staying in auto camps and keeping to the back roads, and at one point a small town officer pulled them over for speeding. Nelson went to the police station and paid a $5 fine and drove off. Nobody searched the car, which carried machine guns, rifle, and ammunition. The most wanted family in America cleared a routine traffic stop like any other household on a road trip because Nelson stayed calm and boring when everywhere else except inside of the bank, of course. My uncle gets more worked up renewing his truck registration than this man got paying a fine with a truck full of machine guns. They drifted through Sacramento and San Francisco. Then they went to Reno and Las Vegas, because you got to go to Vegas. Auto camps and hot springs in Nevada carried them through October, and at the start of November, they turned back towards Chicago, where it's cold. The end came on November 27, 1934, on a highway outside Barrington, Illinois. 6 months, 4 days after Bonnie and Clyde. Federal agents Samuel Cowley and Herman Hollis spotted their stolen the car that Nelson was driving, and it turned into a run and gun battle. Both agents were killed. Nelson took multiple rounds and died that night, and no other fugitives of the 1930s killed more FBI agents in a single gunfight than he did. He was 25 years old, and his body turned up the next morning in a ditch near a cemetery in Niles Center after an anonymous phone call told the government where to look. Well, that was Babyface Nelson's reaction to Bonnie and Clyde's deaths. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, or let me rephrase that, this episode. Talk to you later. Make sure you subscribe and give this video a hype.